Hello, my name is Jeannie, and I'm going to be doing a nature subject today on cats. So I hope you enjoy it. So growing up, I have always had cats. In fact, at this time we have 3 cats. One is a long-haired Norwegian forest cat, and the other 2 are wonderful short-haired cats. My first cat had only 3 legs and a stump. So my brother Billy called her Stumperton Pea Cucumber. The rest of the family just called her Kitten Brat. Even though she had only 3 legs, Kitten Brat was still able to climb trees and catch birds. Kitten Brat was a very smart cat, and Kitten Brat was a black calico. One day my youngest sister Tamara decided she was going to feed Kitten Brat some gravy on her finger. So Kitten Brat, thinking it was a chunk of meat, bit down hard on Tamara's finger. So lucky Tamara had to go to the doctor, and poor Kitten Brat had to be put on quarantine in a big cage. Do you think that was going to keep Kitten Brat in that cage? No way. The cage had only a latch on it, and so Kitten Brat would wait until we got inside the house, and then she, being such a smart cat, she put her paw under the latch and jumped out of the cage and jumped around. She was happy. She was free. At first, we couldn't figure out how she was getting out. So finally, we decided we'd go in the house and watch her as she patiently put her paw under the latch and escaped. Boy, she was so happy. So until we put a clothespin on the latch, and then she had to stay in the cage for 2 weeks. Maybe Kitten Brat had only three legs, but I think God gave her an extra big brain for a cat because she was a very clever cat. The next 2 weeks, I discovered at the animal shelter and gave to my husband for an anniversary present 2 kittens, and they were called Manx. Manx are kittens that are born without tails or just have a stump of a tail. And the Manx cats came originally from a place called the Island of Man, and it's off the coast of England. We named the 2 kittens Delilah and Samson. Delilah loved plants, so I gave her a small rug and bought some plants, and I placed the plants around the edge of the rug. I'm going to read you a poem I wrote about Delilah and her plants. This is called Delilah's Garden. Little torty cat huddled between the pots, waiting for seeds to pop. She lovingly guards the tiny plants, protecting them in her own way. Then one day the plants disappear. Little Delilah is in despair. She wanders the house sadly, lonely without her little plants. Depressed, she lies down in distress. Then one day she brightens, as appearing of a tiny climbing rose. She then lies near it, striking a contented pose. The very next day from holiday, a pretty pink spotted plant shows its dashing display. Delilah is ecstatic. She dashes excitedly around the house, only once again to lie quietly like a mouse. Another 2 surprises the very next day from holiday. A lovely lavender rose and asparagus fern to make her day. Delilah now will never stray, for she has a wonderful place to stay in her garden every day. Outside of a house, we have a large wooden deck, and on side of the right side of the deck, we have a beautiful tall green bush. Delilah loved to lie down on the deck under the beautiful yellow rose bush. One day, we were given a half-grown puppy, and the puppy's name was Capone. And that was his name by his former owner. So Capone was a nice puppy, however, he was very adventurous. We also had a full-grown red chow dog, and his name was Solomon. Solomon was a very wise dog, just like Solomon in the Bible. So one beautiful sunny day, Delilah decided she wanted to go outside to lie underneath the beautiful yellow rose bush. As Delilah was lounging on the deck, along came Capone. Capone started barking at Delilah. Samson, hearing his sister with Delilah was hissing at Capone, and ran outside to rescue her. Solomon, our chow, walked calmly up the stairs to the deck, while I was silently praying. Solomon stood at the back of the deck and he barked, "Ruff!" Capone then turned around and followed Solomon down the stairs, and Delilah and Samson both walked quietly into the house. I said a quiet prayer to God for preventing a big, disastrous fight. And here is a picture of Solomon. It's a very wise dog. Okay, Shiloh. Okay, Shiloh was a half-grown kitten when a friend gave him to us. He was raised outside, so my husband put him in a big shop. After Shiloh had been with us for a few weeks, Keith let him out in the morning and then would bring him to the shop at night. One day, when I was returning home from a walk, I saw a half-grown fox crossing the street. I walked to our house, and then I heard Shiloh scream. I called for my husband, and he ran down the driveway, only to discover that Shiloh had frightened the little fox away. I was very thankful that God had protected my cat. Our house backs up to Highway 90. One day, my husband was walking around our property, and he saw our cat Shiloh sitting next to Highway 90, hissing at another cat. My husband Keith climbed over our fence and headed to get Shiloh. As soon as the other cat saw my husband, it ran through the drain pipe that ran under the highway. Shiloh then chased the other cat through the same drain pipe. So Keith had to wait till the highway was clear, and then he crossed the street to get Shiloh. When Keith got safely to the other side of the freeway, Shiloh took one look at Keith and ran to the drain pipe and headed up back near our property. Keith carefully crossed Highway 20 and ended up near our property. Once again, Shiloh took one look at Keith and ran through the pipe to the other side of the freeway. So Keith once again crossed Highway 20, grabbed Shiloh, and carried him back safely to our property. About 2 months later, a friend of Keith's was visiting and looked at Shiloh and told Keith, "Do you know that I've seen your cat at Chevron?" So Shiloh was continuing to use the drain pipe to cross the street. What a crazy smart cat. It shows that God wanted animals to have companions also. And this is about Shiloh and his new friend. Shiloh was getting really sad because his friend Grumpy Girl had died. Shiloh is a very friendly cat, so he quickly made friends with the neighbor's cat, and they were great pals. Unfortunately, the neighbor's cat one day moved away with the family, and once again, Shiloh was sad, moping around the yard. So I told Keith, let's see if we can find Shiloh a new friend at the shelter. So Keith and I drove over to Sammy's friends and headed to the cat building. Both of us examined all the cats until we finally settled on a red striped male called Buddy. Buddy is a very friendly, loving cat. And when we brought Buddy home and placed Shiloh and Buddy together, they screamed. And they raised their backs, and they took off in opposite directions. Keith and I looked at each other and shrugged our shoulders. And within a few days, Shiloh and Buddy were great friends. And Shiloh was happy to have a new friend, and Buddy was happy to have a new home. Buddy now sleeps in Shiloh's bed. And just as Buddy and Shiloh are now great friends, I am thankful that I have a great friend too, and his name is Jesus. Freya. Freya is our Norwegian forest cat. My husband is Norwegian, so we have a Norwegian Elkhounds and Norwegian forest cat. The Norwegian forest cat is a pretty rare. We had to drive all the way to Washington to get a kitten, and she was so tiny. We had to stay in a hotel in a pet area, and poor little Freya was so scared she ended up in our bed and then kept us awake all that night. When we finally got home, one of our dogs, Sulshin, had an upset stomach, so I was feeding her rice and hard-boiled eggs and yogurt inside our little kitchen. Little Freya was hiding behind the trash can in our kitchen, but the smell of the food was so tempting, she became curious about Sulshin's food, so I finally had to give her a little bit. So Freya and Sulshin became really good friends. Our youngest dog, Sophie, popped her nose in the kitchen, and the brave little kitten Freya scratched her on the nose. And since then, Sophie has been very cautious around Freya. Grandma dog Tova likes Freya, but if Freya jumps on her too much, then Tova gives a growl. What Tova likes is Freya's toys. She loves to play with Freya's stuffed animal and her ball. Freya just looks at her and seems to say, "Hey, that's my toy." And if Sulshan is Freya's favorite dog, comes in the house, Freya chases her and jumps on her, and Sulshan just ignores her. Someday when I go to heaven, all the animals and people will be friends. Thank you for being good listeners. I hope to see you again when I talk again next week. Bye.